As we head into the offseason, we look at all the holes Mike Grier has to fill on this roster.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network, we cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow along wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be looking at where the Sharks roster kind of sits right now. Kind of do a nice roster reset, see who's expected to be back next year, see where their holes are at, discuss why I think defense highlights the biggest need on this roster. Plus, the Sharks need more middle six players. So we're going to dig into all that. So before we do that, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. All right. So like last week, we spent a lot of the time kind of going through the wreckage of the season and kind of learning from, what actually happened, right? We saw the defense and offense slightly improved. The special teams and goaltending cratered last season, right? Now we start to look ahead as we know that Mike Grier wants to be more competitive this offseason. Like he said, like this is hopefully the last of like these bottom of the standing type of seasons. Like we need to be a more competitive team going forward, right? And you need to start seeing more wins than losses, and then what we especially compared to the last two seasons. So I think this is a good time to kind of see, especially before we dig into free agency and who's actually out there, just what the roster kind of looks at like right now and where the biggest holes are on this team. So let's start by just kind of looking at this forward group and kind of seeing who we expect to be back, who we expect to not be here, and kind of start to go from there. So looking at this forward group, right, for the 25-26 season. So we know Logan Couture, who's going to have the biggest cap hit right now at $8 million. He's said he's done. You're going to continue to see his cap hit on there because the Sharks needed to get to the cap floor. And it's just kind of one of those things you do with players like Logan Couture, who have been part of the franchise for such a long time. You just kind of eat the contract out here for the last couple of seasons. So we know Tyler Toffoli is going to be on the roster. Alex Winberg going to be on the roster. Barclay Goodrow most likely going to be on the roster. Carl Grundstrom, Ty Dellandrea maybe potentially available, but most likely going to be on the roster. Macklin, Celebrini, like a lock. Will Smith, a lock. Cam Lund, I think Cam Lund is one of those players who would benefit from spending some time next season in the AHL, just like we saw from Colin Graff. William Macklin, 100% going to be on the roster. Zach Ostapchuk, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's going to be on the roster. And then you have Noah Gregor, who's an RFA. Thank you for your services, Mr. Gregor. Best of luck in free agency. Clem Costin, I feel like also the same thing. Thank you for your services, Clem. Best of luck in free agency. Nikolai Kovalenko, I also feel like his time here might be done, especially how the end of the year kind of meetings and locker cleanout went. I wouldn't be surprised if Kovalenko heads back to Russia. And then Thomas Borla, who's an RFA, and the Sharks will continue to own his rights. So this also does not include, of course, Colin Graff, who's down with the Barracuda right now. And I think you can pencil him in to be in the NHL next year with how he's played and how he performed at the end of the season. You have guys who are most likely going to be AHL guys next year, like Igor Chernyshov, Phil Biested, Quentin Musty, Kasper Halttunen, Ethan Cardwell, Podorowski, Patrick Giles. Like all these guys are expected to be in the AHL next year. I think kind of the big one will be Daniel Gushin, who is an RFA. There's speculation that he might be heading back home to Russia, or if he wants to kind of, but none of these guys are like, other than Colin Graf, you feel like, yeah, let me pencil that guy into the starting role, right? So we're gonna look at the lines here in a little bit. There's a lot of holes among the forward group. Defensively, it's not as holy, but you definitely want to hear an upgrade, right? And Mike Greer came out and said, we have to fix this back end, right? We can't let as many goals, right? You can't let as many pucks get into the net. You can't spend so much time hemmed in your own zone. This is a big area of need for us. So here we're at with the Sharks blue line. Mark-Edward Vlasic, of course, and entering the last year of his deal. This nice thing is everybody is entering the last year of their deal with this contract. But Vlasic, right? He's not going anywhere with his $7 million contract. Like, he's here. And also, again, helping to push the Sharks towards the the salary cap floor. Ferraro at $3.25 million, Timothy Liljegren at $3 million, Vincent Desharnais at $2 million, Henry Thrun at $1 million. Jan Ruda, he's a UFA. Fully expect him to thank you for your services, Mr. Ruda. Good luck in free agency. Shakir Mukhamadullin and Jack Thompson, both RFAs, and I do expect both those guys to be back. Mukhamadullin, I think you can pencil him into the lineup. Thompson, I think, is going to be a guy who maybe he spends I think he's still kind of in that tweener role of, AHL, NHL type of player. And then among the goaltenders, you have Alexander Georgiev and Georgi Romanov. Both, we already know Georgiev isn't going to be here. Romanov, I would assume, gets re-signed and is probably in that AHL, is probably your number one in the AHL next year. And of course, Yaroslav Askarov, who's currently on the Barracuda, he starts his 2-year, $2 million deal, and right, you can pencil him in as he is your 1A goalie next season. So, looking again at guys who are in the AHL who maybe can contribute, but we'll see. You have Luca Cagnoni, who I think safe to say he probably at least starts next season in the AHL, and then maybe he kind of gets the Mukhamadullin treatment where he spends half the season before he becomes a full-time NHL player. Sam Dickinson, which he's definitely a huge wild card with this if he's going to be NHL ready. Jake Furlong, who I think spent some time in the AHL. Lucas Carlson, is also, I think, an AHL guy. Jimmy Schultz, who's a UFA, and I'd love to re-sign him because I think but being as kind of your 8th defenseman, most on the Barracuda, but if you start to deal with some injuries, you can bring him up. And then you have Noah Beck, who the Sharks signed, and then Leo Saleh-Wallenius, who's going to be back over he's going to be spending at least one more season in the SHL before he comes over. So there's definitely some room for improvement, especially with so many guys here on 1-year deals on the back end. So where does this kind of put everybody as of right now with the Sharks? It's not pretty. So cobbling together a line, William Macklin, Celebrini, Tara Toffoli, the 70s line. Okay, there's a line. On the second line, right, we know Will Smith's going to get an opportunity to play center again. It's Will Smith and no wingers, right? Who among those people do you feel like you can confidently put into the opening night roster and feel good about it, right? Maybe Bordelot, maybe Gushin, but I'm not willing to just give them a job right now. So on the third line, Alex Wenberg, Colin Graf, and question mark winger, with Barclay Goodrow, Zach Ostapchuk, and Ty Dellandrea on your fourth line, and Carl Grundstrom kind of being your extra. Defensively, Ferraro, question mark, Shakir Mukhamadullin, Liljegren, Henry Thrun, and the Desharnais. And again, all those guys last year, their deals, then you have Askarov and question mark. So there's, by my counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential starting roles up for grabs right now. Because the Sharks just they just need to add more NHL caliber players this offseason. So and while there's more holes in the middle six, I still feel like the defense is the biggest thing you need to overhaul this offseason. So we'll talk about the defense here in a minute, why I think that is. And we'll, look at who may or may not be here a little bit more in just 1 second. Ever check your bank account, wonder where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, or if you're like me, just trying to buy snacks for your kids? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So don't just stop managing your money. You can actually start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track both shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, before we dive into the defense more, do want to, of course, thank you guys for making the Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe as we start to kind of dig into free agency, dig into the draft. We're going to be kind of looking at it wide right now, and we're just going to start to kind of focus in and hone in on players, everything that I feel like would be good fits for the Sharks as they try to kind of make that jump. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right, the defense. While again, like you look at it, everybody's under contract. There's not a lot of holes. You could roll out 6 defensemen right now and play a hockey game, as compared to the forwards, which does have actual legitimate holes. But you can't just roll out the same 6 dudes you did last year and be like, they're just going to get better. Like they're going to get better. They're somehow going to learn how to do the things that they're not very good at, which is like transporting the puck, getting the puck out of their own zone, not getting hemmed in their own zone. They're going to just all of a sudden magically get better at that. And while, again, you have plenty of guys, none of those guys, other than like Muka Madulin, do you feel like are long-term building blocks? And Mario Ferraro is a whole other conversation of what the Sharks want to do with him. I mean, they've clearly shopped him multiple times as he enters the last year of his deal. And would you be surprised if the Sharks traded Mario Ferraro this offseason? Because I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if, again, looking at that defensive group, pulling it back up right now. Like Vlasic, 100%. Like he's not going anywhere just because of the contract. But Mario Ferraro, would you be surprised if he got traded? Liljegren, would you be surprised if he got traded? Vinny Desharnais, would you be surprised if he got traded? Like even Henry Thrun. Like out of all those guys, would you be surprised if any of them got traded this offseason? Because I wouldn't. Now, I'm not saying that Mike Grier is going to go out and do that, but like none of those guys you feel like are long-term building blocks. And yes, a majority of those guys are going to be back, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Grier does trade some of those guys, because you have to make room for eventually for your guys that are coming, right? With Sam Dickinson, Luca Cagnoni, fingers crossed, Matthew Schaefer. But other than Cagnoni, like maybe Dickinson's playing in the NHL next year, maybe not. Matthew Schaefer, I think it's fair to say, especially after missing half a season plus in the OHL, it's probably best for him just go back in the OHL and play a full season in the OHL, and just go destroy people for a year. And then we'll see you in the 26-27 season, right? But I think a lot of these guys are just kind of placeholders right now. And I do believe Mike Greer is going to be super active to try to upgrade in a lot of these spots here. And whether that's through trading picks, which we will discuss at some point, whether that's through free agency, which we're going to start to dive into tomorrow. I don't think you can roll out the same 6 guys and feel like we're going to be better. It's what's right. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Like, you can't just roll out all these guys and expect the defense to just magically get better. And I know the Sharks dealt with injuries, etc., but like, most of these guys on good teams are bottom pairing defensemen, right? Maybe Liljegren's like your 4th defenseman. Same thing with Ferraro, or probably like your 4th or 5th defenseman. But most of these guys are I think they just kind of are what they are at this point, excluding Shakir Mukhamadullin, who, has played half a season in the NHL and I is a pillar to this group here. So, and that it doesn't even include Askarov, right? We have the playbook. We know Mike Greer said before the Askarov trade, we've been working on this trade for a long time, right? Someone that they've coveted, and they've been working on this trade for a long time. What did Mike Greer and Joe Will do last offseason for the Barracuda? You went out and got Jimmy Schultz, one of the best defensemen in the AHL. You went out and you got Lucas Carlson, one of the best offensive defensemen in the AHL, right? You've also, you got guys like Cagnoni, who definitely popped. That I don't think a lot of us, even the Queen Bees and the Cagnoni hive, didn't expect what we expected from Luca Cagnoni. But still, like, he went out of the way to make sure Askarov was going to be in a position to succeed by revamping that entire blue line, right? And yeah, I know, like, the Barracuda got kind of with so many injuries and trades that the Sharks made. At the end of the season, it was a little bit kind of wonky there for the Barracuda, but they just had way more depth. And now you're seeing that depth. If you've been watching the Barracuda in playoffs, you've been seeing that defensive depth. Like, that defense is very good. So you went out, right? You got Askarov, who you feel like is this beautiful, perfect goalie prospect, right? The best goalie not in the NHL. Why wouldn't you try to put him in a position to succeed and go out and revamp this blue line? And if 4 out of 6 players next year are brand new players, would that surprise you? I mean, that would be pretty extreme, but still, I think Mike Greer, it would be in his best interest to go out and revamp this entire blue line, because it sets up Askarov to have the type of season that you expect. And it just makes your forwards' life easier, like Celebrini and Smith and Macklin and all these young players that you feel like, they're not just spending so much time in their defensive zone, right? They're spending more time in their offensive zone, and you're not having to rely on Macklin Celebrini to be just the only guy who can get the puck from point A to point B on a regular basis. So I 100% expect this defense to look just completely different. And whether that's you have to trade Ferraro, or you have to trade, whomever, that's fine. Do you really want to give Mario Ferraro another 4-year contract at, $4.5 million? Because I do not. I like that contract. Sounds horrible to me, having to do that. I don't want to be the one to give Mario Ferraro his next contract. And yes, I know he played, the majority of the games. Some bad luck at the end of the season with, what was it, a fractured ankle or whatever it was, like. But how often is it with Ferraro, right? You see these little this and that, like these, the way he plays hockey, where he's going to be a tryhard. I'm going to block shots and everything he does. Like, I would be very worrisome about that next Ferraro contract. So, but again, that's just me. So, yes, I do believe Mike Grier is going to be extremely aggressive overhauling this defense because it's in the best interest of the team to overhaul this defense. And you just don't have a lot of pieces that you feel like are going to be NHL impact players in the next year or two, right? I know Kenyoni, we love Kenyoni, but even if Sam Dickinson plays next year, like, is Sam Dickinson on the is he going to be on the Will Smith? Will Smith plan of success of let's kind of keep the training wheels on for the first half of the season, then go look how it goes. Or, look at a guy like Kevin Krasinski, right? Similar kind of draft position, similar role. Drafted, he had a brutal first season in the NHL. It's a lot to expect some of these young defensemen, just to step in and be good right away. So I would be more than fine with trying to just put some layers of protection, and then when your young defensemen are ready to take a job, that's a conversation you can have at a later date. So while the defense does need to be ramped, there's a ton of holes in the middle six here. Will Smith has no friends on his wing, so we're going to be discussing that and backup goalie question mark or goalies question mark here in 1 second. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I'm a in-shell person, but if you like the no-shell variety, I'm not going to shell shame you. I just like hearing that little crack. But either way, throw a bag of them in your work bag, throw one in your desk, right? Especially around that 2:30 snacky time. They have a ton of different flavors, and each of them providing all 9 essential amino acids. So get snacking and get cracking with these snacks that pack a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right. I do want to, of course, thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. When you're done with this episode, go check out the Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local announcements on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay. So while the defense, not as holy, but definitely needs a total makeover, the middle six just way more holy, right? And again, like pulling up the potential lines here. Eklund, Celebrini, Toffoli. Okay, we saw plenty of that this season, right? We know we're going to move Will Smith back to center, at least to try. That leaves you with 3 wingers: if Wenberg and Graf, Goodrow, Sopchak, and Dellandrea. And yes, there are more in-house options, right? Thomas Borlo, Daniel Gushin. I think both those guys more than deserving to get an opportunity to play NHL games next year. But it's not like I think Mike Grier has kind of said what he feels about both these players by him not calling them up very much at all this season, right? Gushin started the season with the Sharks, and then he didn't come back until, the last, game or 2 games of the season. And that was only after Thomas Bordlow came up for 1 game and then got injured. I do think, and yes, there are options coming, right? Between Musty, Chernyshov, Kasper Haltonen, like all these guys are going to be, Cam Lund, all these guys are going to be in the, at least start what I think are going to start the season in the AHL next year, which is fine. But I don't think it's, I kind of made the argument last week. I don't think it's fair to Will Smith and Eklund and Celebrini and all these other guys just to kind of wait around for some of these younger players to develop, right? And I don't think it's fair to the younger players to be like, we need you to play NHL games right now because we don't have anybody else. Quentin Musty, I think, is going to be a great player. Is Quentin Musty ready to play NHL games right now? No, he's not. He needs to get used to playing against professional hockey players. And if only there was a league where you could their whole thing was developing players for the NHL. Oh, the American Hockey League. That's where he needs to be playing next season, right? Igor Chernyshov. Do I think Igor Chernyshov, the same thing, watching his games in the AHL, he just looked a beat slow. And yes, I think that'll get better as he plays more and more games in the AHL. But these guys just need to, we've seen it with the way the Sharks have handled a lot of their prospects, right? William Macklin, 7th overall pick, spent an entire season in the AHL. They wanted him to over-ripen. I don't think that changes right now for Musty or for Chernyshov or Haltonen or even Cam Lund. Do I think out of all those guys, I think Cam Lund's the one who makes it back to the NHL soonest? Yes. But we saw the success Colin Graff had last year after he played half the season in the NHL or in the AHL before coming back up. The Sharks need to find at least 3 middle 6 forwards this offseason, and preferably one that has some sort of center wing flexibility, because if Will Smith, yes, we want Will Smith to try to be a center again, but if Will Smith just isn't ready to be a center again, you need someone who can step in, right? And whether that's Wenberg moving up to the second wing or second center, and then, whatever free agent, it becomes your third center, that's fine. But you need someone, you just need more NHL bodies out there. And it would be nice to go get a big time guy. I'm not saying like a Mitch Marner, but like a Brock Besser or somebody of that ilk who can score, right? And just give you just another layer of scoring that this team desperately needs. Again, this was the second worst offense in the NHL this year. Or were they they were one of the bottom 2. I can't remember if they finished it last year or not, but the point remains, you need to add more talent. And I don't think anything that the Sharks do, even if you do sign one of these guys to for example, Brock Besser, I'm just using him as an example. Even if you do sign Brock Besser to a long-term deal, you can still sign plenty of other guys to kind of smaller deals and, 2 to 3 years. And you hope by then Musty's ready to take somebody's job. And maybe those guys are getting pushed down to the third line where maybe they kind of fit where they belong a little bit more. That's the hope, right? Is some of these guys that you're looking for as bridge guys, they're here to kind of hold down the fort until your young guys are ready to take a job from them. So the Sharks need to be very active in adding pieces because, again, you have to spend at least $20 million to hit the cap floor. So however you want to divide that up, just $20 million just to hit the cap floor, you're going to need to spend some money. And then goalies, right? You got to find a competent, at least one goalie who can play, that you can kind of pencil in for 35 to 40 games a season and feel good about it. Right. We expect Askarov to be the guy, but I do think they're going to be very deliberate with how they use him. And look at Dustin Wolf, right? Dustin Wolf split the start of the season splitting, it was very split between him and Dan Vladar. And then eventually Dustin Wolf was just better and he took over. I kind of see the same approach with Askarov, where they're probably going to be very deliberate. They don't want to put too much on Askarov's plate right away. As the season goes along, then Askarov earns more and more starts. I'm also curious to see what they do if they try to bring in a veteran third AHL type of player, right? Especially if you do bring back Romanov and you have Gabe Carrier. Both those guys will need new contracts, but still. Do you bring in a third guy to kind of, in case somebody goes down, let's bring out, we have a guy who we feel confident can come in and play a handful of games if needed type of performance. So, but yeah, I think the biggest needs, if I'm ranking them, the defense needs to be overhauled. Just one with Askarov coming next year, like the defense needs to be overhauled, even though it already has the most amount of, or has the least amount of holes. I don't think you can just run back their same 6 guys and be like, we're good guys. The offense, you have to add more competition. I think that's the best way. Just more competition there, right? Because Borlo and Gushin, as much as I love those guys, it seems like the writing's on the wall for both those guys, where you're running out of time here to come take a job. So I do think there needs to be more competition there, and there needs to be some flexibility between center and wing for Will Smith. So, but yeah, tomorrow we're going to start looking at free agent class. We're going to be looking at kind of all the big names and all the categories, right? We're going to be looking at the top centers, and we're just going to kind of get started digging into that as we start our off season here, all working towards the whole goal here is we're going to be working towards a simulated off season where I'm going to do what I would do in free agency, what I would do in the draft, all that fun stuff, contracts I would hand out, everything like that. We're going to be doing a whole simulated off season, probably like the week before the draft. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.